They ignored my birthday like they always do. Then, that same week, they threw my sister a huge, over-the-top party. That was the last straw for me, so I walked away for good. What they did next was completely unhinged. You guys, I need to tell you something that still makes my blood run cold. Just last month, my family didn't just hurt me, they crossed a line so twisted, so utterly dehumanizing, that it shattered every last shred of hope I had for us. This isn't just about a birthday, it's about a lifetime of being invisible, and what happens when the forgotten child finally dares to stand up for herself. Let me take you back a bit. I'm Juliet, 28, the middle child. My older sister, Madison, is 31, the golden girl, straight A's, full ride to Northwestern, could do no wrong. Then there's Chloe, 25, the surprise blessing, spoiled rotten, who got everything her heart desired. And me? I was just, me. Average grades, no standout talents, the one who tried to stay quiet and not make waves. My parents, Linda and Robert, always saw me as the independent one, low maintenance. What they never understood was that I learned to be low maintenance out of necessity, because asking for anything usually just led to disappointment. Birthdays were always a brutal reminder of where I stood. Madison's were events, themed parties, elaborate decorations, expensive gifts, weeks of planning. Chloe's were even wilder, princess parties, pony rides, bouncy houses. Whatever she dreamed, she got. Mine? A store-bought cake, dinner at whatever casual place I felt guilty asking for, a few practical gifts. No friends, just the five of us around the dining table, with my parents mostly glued to their phones. I told myself it didn't matter, that I preferred intimate celebrations. But deep down, it stung every single time. It was a punch to the gut, especially when their birthday decorations for my sisters cost more than my entire celebration. This pattern didn't stop in adulthood. Madison's 30th was a fully paid Napa Valley getaway. Chloe's 24th was a surprise party for 40 guests at an upscale restaurant. My 27th? A text asking if I wanted to grab lunch sometime that week. I tried talking to them, believe me. Their excuses were always the same: Madison's so stressed with law practice, or Chloe's going through a tough time. When I pointed out the blatant favoritism, my mom would get defensive, telling me I was being dramatic and that they loved us equally, just differently. But this year, something shifted inside me. My 28th birthday was coming up on October 15th, and I was determined. I was going to finally have a celebration that felt like mine. I started dropping hints, telling them how excited I was. 3 weeks before, I sat my parents down. I looked them in the eye and explained how overlooked I'd felt for years, how important it was to me that they put some real effort into making this one memorable. I wasn't asking for the moon, just a nice dinner, maybe invite my aunts and uncles, a custom cake, some decorations. The basic stuff they'd done countless times for my sisters without a second thought. My dad nodded, promising to make it special. My mom hugged me, apologizing for not realizing my feelings. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt seen. I felt valued. I actually started telling my friends that my family was finally going to throw me a proper birthday party. As the 15th got closer, I kept asking about plans. My mom would just say, "We're working on it, honey, leave it to us." I thought, okay, maybe it's a surprise. I even bought a new dress. Then October 15th arrived. And went. Nothing. No party, no special dinner, no decorations. Just another casual family meal at a chain restaurant. The server sang "Happy Birthday" while my dad took 2 photos, and my mom talked about her book club. Madison didn't even show up. Chloe was 20 minutes late because she got distracted shopping. The whole thing lasted an hour and a half. I drove home, completely numb, feeling more invisible than I ever had before. I was devastated, but I tried to rationalize it. Maybe a belated celebration? Maybe something came up? I gave them the benefit of the doubt. Then came October 20th. I was scrolling through Instagram when I saw my cousin Tyler's story. It was a video of this absolutely gorgeous party setup, twinkling lights, lavish floral arrangements, a dessert table straight out of a magazine, and a huge banner in elegant gold lettering that read, "Happy 25th birthday, Chloe." My heart literally stopped. I clicked through his stories, and it felt like a physical blow. There was Chloe, in a stunning dress, surrounded by at least 50 people, celebrating her 25th birthday. In my parents' backyard. A backyard that had been transformed into a fairy tale. My hands were shaking as I called my mom. She answered, "Juliet, honey, what's up? What's up?" I barely kept my voice from cracking. "You threw Chloe a massive birthday party 5 days after completely ignoring mine." There was a beat of silence. Then, "Oh, sweetie, this is different. Chloe's been so down because of her breakup. We thought she needed cheering up. Plus, her birthday's next month, but she's traveling for work, so we moved it up." I just stared at the phone. "So, you moved her birthday party to 5 days after mine? After I specifically told you how important this birthday was to me?" Her voice hardened. "Juliet, you're being dramatic again. This isn't about you." Dramatic again? After 28 years of being overlooked, dismissed, and treated like an afterthought, I was being dramatic? "You know what, Mom?" I said, a strange calm washing over me. "You're right. This isn't about me. It's never been about me, and I'm finally okay with that." I hung up. I sat in my apartment, staring at more Instagram posts, professional photos, a live acoustic guitarist, catered food, a custom 3-tier cake. Everything I had asked for, and more, was given to Chloe without her even having to lift a finger. That's when I made my decision. I was done. I didn't make a grand announcement. I didn't send a dramatic text. I just stopped. I stopped calling. Stopped texting. Stopped showing up to family dinners. I left the family group chat and unfollowed them all on social media. I thought, if they truly care, they'll notice. They'll reach out. For 2 weeks, nothing. Complete silence. It was a validation, a sickening confirmation that I really was that forgettable. Then my phone started ringing. Madison first. "Juliet, Mom is freaking out that you've gone no contact. What's your problem?" When I explained, she scoffed. "You're seriously cutting off the family because of a birthday party? That's incredibly immature." Then Chloe, the audacity, "I didn't even ask for that party. You're punishing me for something I didn't do." But the real insanity began when my parents realized I was serious. My mom showed up at my apartment unannounced, crying hysterically in my hallway. "Juliet, you're tearing this family apart. Your father hasn't slept in days. How can you be so selfish?" Selfish? I was selfish for removing myself from a dynamic that was actively harming me? When I calmly asked her to leave, she started screaming that I was throwing away my family over nothing and acting like a spoiled brat. My neighbor actually came out to check if everything was okay. My dad tried a different tactic. He sent long, manipulative emails about how disappointed he was, how I was abandoning them, setting a terrible example. He accused me of being jealous and vindictive. He brought up every family vacation, every dollar they spent on my education, as if I owed them a relationship because of their basic parental obligations. Madison chimed in again, calling me, sobbing, saying Mom was eating anxiety medication like candy and Dad was drinking more. It was all my fault, of course, for being stubborn and unreasonable. "Family is supposed to forgive each other," she cried. "You're choosing your pride over your family." But here's where it went truly off the rails. When their guilt trips failed, they called in the cavalry. Suddenly, I was getting calls and texts from aunts, uncles, grandparents, even family friends. All telling me what a terrible daughter I was, how heartbroken my parents were. My Aunt Carol, who I barely spoke to, left a voicemail telling me to get over myself and apologize. My 82-year-old grandmother called to say I was shaming the family. The most ridiculous? My mom's friend from work, who I'd met maybe 3 times, messaged me on Facebook, calling my parents saints and me ungrateful. They had successfully spun a narrative where I was the villain, not a daughter who'd been consistently overlooked and finally found her voice. Then, 3 weeks after I went no contact, the absolute peak of their insanity. I came home from work to find my entire family sitting in my apartment building's lobby. My parents, both sisters, and my Uncle Pete, who lived 3 hours away. They'd somehow convinced my building manager to let them wait, claiming a family emergency. When I saw them, I immediately turned to leave, but my dad yelled, "Juliet, we're not leaving until you talk to us." I was trapped. My neighbors were staring. I reluctantly agreed to go upstairs. The moment we stepped into my apartment, they ambushed me. My mom immediately started crying again, talking about destroying the family, not sleeping for weeks. My dad launched into a lecture about responsibility and commitment. Madison kept interrupting, calling me ridiculous and childish. Chloe just sat there, looking confused and hurt, asking why I hated her so much. But Uncle Pete, who barely knew me, was the worst. He started yelling, pointing his finger in my face, about how I was disrespecting my elders and how kids today don't know how good they have it. He actually told me I was a disappointment. For an entire hour, they took turns, berating me, guilt-tripping me, demanding I apologize and come back to family dinners. Not once did anyone acknowledge why I distanced myself. Not once did anyone validate my feelings. Finally, I'd had enough. "Get out," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Juliet, we're trying to help you," my mom began. "Get out," I shouted, my voice shaking with raw anger. The room went silent. They were stunned. I continued, "You want to know what's childish? What's childish is 28 years of treating one child differently and then gaslighting her when she calls you out on it. What's childish is mobilizing the entire extended family to harass someone instead of just reflecting on your own behavior." I looked directly at my parents. "You had the chance to show me I mattered. I begged you to make my birthday special, and you couldn't be bothered. But 5 days later, you threw Chloe the party of her dreams without her even asking." My mom opened her mouth, but I cut her off. "I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not going to keep begging for crumbs of attention from people who clearly don't value me. I'm not going to keep pretending that being treated like an afterthought is normal or acceptable." I walked to my front door and opened it wide. "Leave now. And don't come back unless you're ready to acknowledge what you've done and genuinely apologize." One by one, they shuffled out. My mom crying, my dad shaking his head in disgust, Uncle Pete muttering about ungrateful kids. Madison was the last. She paused in my doorway. "You know, Juliet," she said, "sometimes I don't even recognize you anymore. This isn't who you used to be." I looked her dead in the eye. "You're right," I replied. "I used to be someone who accepted being treated poorly because I was afraid of losing my family. Now I'm someone who knows I deserve better." After they left, I sat on my couch and just sobbed for 2 hours. It wasn't because I missed them, but because I was mourning the family I had always wanted, but never truly had. That was 6 weeks ago. And things have only gotten more insane. They've launched what I can only describe as a full-scale campaign to force me back. They contacted my employer, claiming concern for my mental health. They reached out to my friends, saying I'd had a breakdown. My mom has sent over 50 emails, ranging from tearful apologies that blamed me for misunderstanding them, to angry rants about how I was tearing the family apart. My dad started showing up at my apartment building, leaving gifts and notes outside my door. Chloe was the worst, creating fake social media accounts to message me, asking why I hated her. When I blocked those, her friends started messaging me instead. Madison actually hired a lawyer to send me a cease and desist letter, claiming I was harassing the family by not responding to their contact attempts. You heard that right, they sent me a legal document demanding that I stop ignoring them. The latest escalation came last week. They all showed up at my workplace during my lunch break. My mom marched into reception, crying loudly about her daughter having a mental breakdown. My dad demanded to speak to my supervisor about his concerns for my well-being. My boss, thankfully, is an absolute rock star. She basically told them to leave or she'd call security. But it was mortifying. I had to explain everything to HR, just to make sure they understood I wasn't actually having a mental health crisis. The bitter irony in all of this is that their behavior is proving exactly why I needed to distance myself. Instead of reflecting on their actions, they've doubled down on emotional manipulation, harassment, and public humiliation. They keep saying I'm tearing the family apart. But what family? A family where one member is consistently treated as less important? Where expressing hurt makes you dramatic and selfish? A family that mobilizes against you the moment you stop accepting poor treatment? I'm seeing a therapist, and she's helped me understand that what they're doing isn't normal or healthy. The level of harassment I've experienced since going no contact is actually confirmation that I made the right choice. I've changed my phone number, beefed up my apartment security, and I'm documenting absolutely everything. Some days are harder than others. I do miss the idea of a close family, but I absolutely do not miss the reality of how they treated me. I've been able to build stronger friendships, and focus on my career in ways I never could when I was constantly dealing with their drama. My friends have been incredible through this, validating my decision, and helping me see how abnormal my family's behavior really is. Several of them said they always wondered why I seemed so anxious around my family, and now they understand. The true breaking point, the one that made me realize I couldn't back down, came a couple of weeks after the workplace incident. I was starting to think they were finally backing off when my landlord, Mrs. Peterson, this sweet, elderly woman, called me. She sounded genuinely concerned. "Juliet, honey," she said hesitantly, "your mother called me this morning. She's very worried about you and asked if I could do a wellness check. She said you might be having some kind of mental health crisis." My blood ran cold. They were now involving my landlord in their manipulation campaign. "Mrs. Peterson," I assured her, "I'm perfectly fine. My family and I are having a disagreement, and they're trying to pressure me by making it seem like I'm unstable. I promise you I'm healthy." There was a pause. "Well, you certainly sound fine to me, dear," she replied, "but your mother was very insistent. She even asked if she could have a spare key to check on you." The sheer audacity took my breath away. "Absolutely not," I said firmly. "I do not want my family to have any access to my apartment or information about me. If they contact you again, please don't engage." She agreed, but I could tell she was uncomfortable. I felt terrible for dragging her into this. That same week, I discovered they'd escalated to an even more disturbing level. My best friend, Jessica, called me, sounding confused and a little freaked out. "Juliet, I just had the weirdest conversation with someone claiming to be your sister," she said. "She found me on LinkedIn and sent me this long message about how you've cut off your entire family and they're worried you're having a breakdown. She asked if I'd noticed any changes in your behavior and if I could convince you to call your mom." Madison had turned into a private investigator, tracking down my friends, trying to find out about my mental state. "What did you tell her?" I asked. "I told her you seemed happier and more relaxed than I'd seen you in years, and maybe there was a reason you needed space from them," Jessica replied. "But Juliet, this is really weird behavior. Normal families don't hire detective services on their own children." She was so right. But it got worse. Over the next few days, I found out Madison had contacted not just Jessica, but practically everyone I knew. My college roommate, Emma, got a Facebook message. My coworker David got a LinkedIn message. Even my yoga instructor, who I'd only mentioned in passing years ago during family dinners, got contacted. The messages were all the same, expressing concern about my mental health, claiming I'd suddenly cut off my loving family for no reason, and asking people to report back on my behavior and convince me to reconcile. It was a coordinated campaign to isolate me and make me look unstable. The most insidious part was how they framed it as concern, rather than harassment. To someone who didn't know the full story, it might actually look like they were worried family members trying to help a troubled relative. But my friend saw right through it. Emma called me laughing, saying Madison's message was so over-the-top dramatic it read like a soap opera script. David was actually angry on my behalf, calling their behavior manipulative and creepy. The validation from my friends meant everything, but I was also deeply embarrassed that my family drama was now affecting people who had nothing to do with it. Then came what I now refer to as the Christmas campaign. Even though it was only November, my mom started her holiday guilt offensive early. I began receiving daily emails with subject lines like "Your empty chair at Christmas" and "How can we celebrate without you?" The emails were masterpieces of emotional manipulation. She wrote about how she'd already bought my Christmas presents and how heartbroken she was that I wouldn't be there. She described how she'd been crying while decorating the house because every ornament reminded her of me. She even sent me a photo of the Christmas stockings she'd hung for me, just in case I came to my senses. My dad joined in with his own version, sending me articles about the importance of family during the holidays and statistics about how family estrangement affects mental health. He'd forward me these pieces with comments like, "This made me think of you and how much you're hurting yourself by staying away." Chloe's approach was different, but equally manipulative. She started posting Instagram stories clearly designed to make me feel guilty. Photos of her looking sad with captions like "Missing someone who used to be my best friend and wish I understood what I did wrong." She'd post throwback photos of us as kids with captions like "Simpler times when my sister still loved me." The worst part was that she was getting a lot of sympathy from mutual friends who didn't know the full story. People were commenting things like, "I'm sorry you're going through this," and "She'll come around eventually." It was like she was crowdsourcing validation for their narrative that I was the unreasonable one. Madison took a more aggressive approach, sending me legal documents about family estrangement and its psychological effects on both parties, with cover letters explaining that she was concerned about the legal and psychological ramifications of my decision and strongly advising me to seek family therapy with all of them. When none of this worked, they systematically recruited my extended family even more. I started getting calls from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, all parroting the same talking points about forgiveness and family loyalty. My cousin Rachel, who I'd barely interacted with since childhood, called me sobbing about how my absence was destroying family unity and how I was being selfish and vindictive. She told me my aunt was having panic attacks because she was so worried, and my grandmother had been praying for me every night. My uncle Mike, who lived across the country and had never shown any interest in my life before, sent me a handwritten letter about how family is the most important thing and how I was throwing away something precious over a misunderstanding. Even cousins I'd never met were messaging me on social media, telling me they'd heard about the family crisis and encouraging me to be the bigger person and reconcile. The coordinated nature of it was obvious and, honestly, kind of impressive in its scope. They had mobilized what felt like every single person who shared even a drop of DNA with me. But perhaps the most manipulative thing they did was involve my grandmother directly in a way that felt particularly cruel. My 82-year-old grandmother, who I genuinely loved and who had always been kind to me, called me one evening crying hysterically. Through her tears, she told me that my mom had told her I'd said I never wanted to see any of them again, and that I hated the whole family. I had never said anything remotely like that. I'd simply stopped engaging with them after repeated attempts to manipulate me. "Juliet, sweetheart," my grandmother sobbed, "I don't understand what we did to make you hate us so much. Your mother is so heartbroken and I'm scared I'm going to die without seeing you again." The conversation broke my heart because I could tell my grandmother genuinely believed what she'd been told. My parents had painted me as this cruel person who had rejected her entire family out of spite, rather than someone who had removed herself from a harmful dynamic. I gently explained to my grandmother that I didn't hate anyone, that I'd simply needed space because of how I'd been treated, and that my parents were misrepresenting both my words and my actions. She listened quietly, and then said something that surprised me. "You know, Juliet, your mother has always been dramatic. Even as a little girl, she'd exaggerate things when she didn't get her way. After that conversation, I realized that some of my extended family might be more receptive to hearing my side of the story than I'd thought. So, I decided to write a letter explaining my perspective to the relatives who had contacted me. I kept it factual and calm, detailing the pattern of differential treatment, the specific incident with the birthday parties, and my attempts to address the issue before going no contact. I emphasized that this wasn't about hatred or revenge, but about protecting my mental health and self-respect. The responses I got were eye-opening. Several relatives apologized for jumping to conclusions, saying they had no idea there was more to the story. My cousin Tyler, who had originally posted the Instagram stories about Chloe's party, actually called me to apologize and said he'd noticed the pattern of favoritism growing up, but hadn't realized how bad it was. My Aunt Carol, who had initially left me angry voicemails, sent me a long email admitting that she'd seen similar behavior from my parents over the years, but had assumed it wasn't her place to say anything. She said she was sorry for not recognizing what I was going through. Even Uncle Pete, who had been so aggressive during the apartment ambush, reached out to apologize after talking to his wife, who had apparently pointed out that his own behavior had been inappropriate, regardless of the family situation. This shift in some of my extended family's understanding seemed to panic my parents and sisters. Suddenly, they were losing control of the narrative they'd worked so hard to establish. That's when they made their most desperate and, frankly, unhinged move yet. I came home from work one day to find a moving truck parked outside my apartment building. Confused, I went upstairs to find my mom directing two movers who were carrying boxes into the apartment next door to mine. She saw me and burst into tears. "Juliet. Oh, honey, I've been so worried about you. What are you doing here?" I asked, though I was terrified I already knew the answer. "I rented the apartment next door so I can be close to you and make sure you're okay," she said, as if this was a completely normal and reasonable thing to do. "The lease is for 6 months, so we'll have plenty of time to work things out." I stood there in shock as she continued, explaining her plan to live next door, cook meals for me, and help me through whatever I was going through. She'd already talked to Mrs. Peterson about it, claiming it was a therapeutic intervention recommended by a family counselor. "Mom, you cannot move in next door to me," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, despite the fact that I was internally screaming. "Sweetie, I'm just trying to take care of you. I know you're hurting and confused, and I want to be here for you." The manipulation was so transparent, it was almost insulting. This wasn't about taking care of me. This was about maintaining surveillance and control. I immediately called Mrs. Peterson, who apologetically explained that my mother had signed a legitimate lease and there wasn't anything she could do to break it without cause. However, she did agree to install better locks on my door and promised to let me know if my mother tried to access any building services or information about me. Living next door to my mother turned out to be every bit as awful as you'd expect. She would knock on my door multiple times a day, leaving food and gifts outside when I didn't answer. She'd wait in the hallway for me to come home, trying to corner me into conversations about working things out. The worst part was that she'd listen through the walls and comment on my activities. If I had friends over, she'd knock, asking if we needed anything. If I was watching TV, she'd text me asking if I wanted to watch together. She even commented on my sleep schedule, expressing concern that I was staying up too late. It felt like living under constant surveillance, and my anxiety levels went through the roof. I started staying at Jessica's apartment most nights just to get some peace. But even that felt like letting them win. After 2 weeks of this psychological warfare, I'd reached my absolute limit. I called a lawyer. Patricia Wright specialized in family law and harassment cases. When I explained the situation, she didn't seem surprised, which was both reassuring and depressing. "Unfortunately, this type of escalation isn't uncommon in family estrangement cases," she told me. "Some families struggle so much with the loss of control that they'll engage in increasingly inappropriate behavior to force a reconciliation." She helped me document everything: the workplace harassment, the contact with my landlord and friends, the legal threats, the fake social media accounts, and now the surveillance via my mother living next door. We have grounds for a restraining order, she said. The pattern of harassment is clear, and your mother's decision to move next door after you'd made your desire for no contact obvious could be considered stalking behavior. I was hesitant to take legal action against my own family. But Patricia explained that sometimes a formal intervention was the only way to make people understand their behavior was unacceptable. Think of it this way, she said. If an ex-boyfriend or former friend was doing these things to you, you wouldn't hesitate to seek legal protection. The fact that they're family members doesn't make their behavior less harmful or inappropriate. She was right. I filed for a temporary restraining order against all four of them, citing harassment, stalking, and interference with my work and living situation. The court date was surreal. My entire family showed up with their own lawyer, looking absolutely shocked that I had actually taken legal action. They seemed to genuinely believe that I was the one behaving unreasonably. Their lawyer tried to argue that their behavior was motivated by love and concern, not harassment. He painted me as an unstable person who was hurting my loving family by refusing all contact. But Patricia had done her homework. She presented documented evidence of their campaign, screenshots of the fake social media accounts, records of the workplace visit, testimonies from friends who had been contacted, and the lease agreement for the apartment next door. The judge granted the temporary restraining order, noting that regardless of their intentions, their behavior had been invasive and inappropriate. They were ordered to stay at least 500 feet away from me, my workplace, and my home, and to cease all contact through third parties. The look of shock on their faces when the judge announced his decision was something I'll never forget. I think it was the first time they realized that other people might view their behavior as problematic rather than loving. My mother actually stood up and started crying, saying that the judge didn't understand that she was just trying to save her daughter. The judge told her to sit down and warned that any violation of the restraining order would result in arrest. For a few weeks after the restraining order was finalized, things were blissfully quiet. My mother moved out of the apartment next door, though she tried to argue with Mrs. Peterson about getting her deposit back, claiming she was being forced to break the lease due to discriminatory legal action. I started sleeping better, feeling less anxious, and actually enjoying my life again. I began to think that maybe, just maybe, the legal intervention had finally made them understand. I should have known better. I know some people will hear this and think I'm overreacting, or that I should just forgive my family and move on. But I've learned that forgiveness doesn't mean accepting continued poor treatment. I've learned that family isn't just about blood relations, it's about people who value you, respect you, and treat you with kindness. I may have lost my biological family, but I've gained something infinitely more valuable, self-respect and the knowledge that I don't have to settle for being anyone's afterthought. To anyone else dealing with similar family dynamics, I want you to know, your feelings are valid. You're not being dramatic for wanting to be treated with respect and love. You are not obligated to maintain relationships that consistently harm your mental health, even if those relationships are with family members. It's been a difficult journey, but for the first time in my life, I feel truly free from the weight of constantly trying to earn love that should have been given freely. And honestly, their absolutely unhinged reaction to me simply walking away has shown me exactly who they really are. I may have lost a family, but I've gained something more profound, peace of mind and the unwavering knowledge that I deserve better than what they were giving me. I'm still processing everything that's happened, but I know I made the right choice. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is walk away, especially, when everyone else thinks you're wrong for doing so. Oh, and as I'm recording this, I just got a notification. They've created a Facebook group called Bring Juliet Home and are inviting extended family members to join. I swear, I can't even make this stuff up. The level of public drama they're willing to create, rather than just apologizing, is truly beyond anything I could have imagined. But it's also the final, undeniable confirmation that I made the right decision. This isn't the behavior of people who love and miss me. This is the behavior of people who are angry they lost control over someone they took for granted. I'm done. I'm finally, completely, irrevocably done. And for the first time in 28 years, that feels like true freedom.